The air downtown always smelled like burnt coffee, bus fumes, and cold ambition. People rushed from place to place, never stopping, never looking around. No one had the time to care. That's what 17-year-old Jamal had learned growing up on the south side of Atlanta. If you weren't watching your own back, no one else would. That's why it caught him off guard when he saw her. He had just gotten off the 32 bus at Peachtree Street, headphones around his neck, backpack slung low. It was one of those grey-skied afternoons where everything felt heavier, like the whole city was holding its breath. Jamal was supposed to be at tutoring, but he'd skipped it. Again. School felt like a losing game most days, and he was tired of pretending like it didn't. He just needed air. He spotted her near the crosswalk, a small, hunched-over woman, standing completely still. Her coat was too big. Her hands clutched a thick leather purse like it was her last defense. People streamed past her, not even glancing. A jogger almost bumped into her without saying sorry. A man in a tailored suit looked at her, then deliberately looked away. Something about her didn't sit right with Jamal. She wasn't begging. She wasn't shouting. She just looked lost. She turned her head side to side, slowly, like she didn't recognize anything around her. Jamal crossed the street toward her. He didn't even know why. Maybe it was because she reminded him of his grandmother. Maybe it was because he knew what it felt like to be invisible. He stopped a few feet away and said gently, "Ma'am, you okay?" She looked up at him, eyes, blue but clouded, almost milky. "I'm not sure," she whispered. "I was trying to go back to the glass hotel." "The Marriott?" he guessed. "The one with the dome roof?" She nodded slowly. "I thought I could just walk, but now I don't remember the way back." Jamal looked around. Still no one had stopped. A woman side-eyed him as if he was the problem, and kept walking. "It's all right. Let's sit down," he said, pointing to a nearby bench. She hesitated, then took his outstretched hand. Her skin was paper-thin and cool. They sat together as the traffic hummed behind them. "I'm Jamal," he offered. "I'm Margaret." "Margaret Wexler," she said, like she was introducing herself to someone important. Something in his brain clicked. That name, he'd heard it before. He took out his phone and typed her name. The screen filled with search results. Margaret Louise Wexler, founder of Wexler Financial. Net worth $3.4 billion. Jamal blinked. Billionaire? She didn't. Looked like someone worth billions. She looked like someone the world had left behind, but there she was. Photos of her online showed a much younger, sharper woman, smiling with politicians and CEOs. Now she sat beside him, confused, ignored, forgotten. He didn't say anything yet. He just kept talking gently, asking if she was thirsty, if she remembered, anyone to call. Margaret pulled out a wallet from her purse. Inside were a few credit cards, a driver's license, and an old photo of a little girl. "My granddaughter," she said softly, running her thumb over the picture. Just then a black Escalade screeched up to the curb, and a woman in a navy suit jumped out. "Mrs. Wexler," she cried, rushing over. Margaret looked up. "Oh, Beverly." "I found a friend." Jamal stood awkwardly. The woman, Beverly, was clearly the assistant or caretaker. "She wandered off during her walk," Beverly said, her voice tight. "I've been driving around looking for her for the past 30 minutes. She was just over there," Jamal said, pointing. "No one was helping her." Beverly nodded, grateful. "Thank you, seriously. Most people would have just left her there." Jamal glanced at the people passing them, still not paying attention. "Yeah, they did." Margaret touched Jamal's hand again. "You were kind, no one else was." Beverly reached into her coat and handed Jamal a white card. "This is the contact number for Mr. Wexler's office. You'll want to answer when they call." And then they were gone. The door shut and the Escalade vanished into traffic. Jamal stared at the business card in his hand. It felt like holding a lottery ticket you didn't know you'd won yet, but he didn't know yet just how deep the rabbit hole would go. He didn't know that the act of taking a stranger's hand on a street corner would soon land him in the middle of a billionaire family's secrets, lies, and a life-changing decision. That night, Jamal couldn't sleep. The white business card sat on his nightstand like a glowing invitation, staring at him in the dark. Clean design, no flashy logo, just a single embossed name in gold letters, Wexler Holdings, with a phone number underneath. He kept going over everything in his mind. The old woman's cloudy eyes, the way she held his hand like she hadn't felt human kindness in years, the way everyone else acted like she wasn't even there. He thought about calling the number right away, but what would he even say? "Hey, I helped your billionaire grandmother cross the street." It sounded ridiculous. He rolled over and tried to sleep. But even in the silence, his thoughts buzzed louder than the city ever could. The next morning, he couldn't focus in school. Not that he really ever could. His mind bounced between algebra and the Escalade, between test prep and billionaires, between being invisible and maybe, just maybe, being seen. He didn't tell anyone about what happened. Not his mother, not his friends, not even his older cousin Trey, who would have just made fun of him. But deep down, Jamal knew something had shifted, like life had nudged him onto a different path, and now he couldn't go back to the sidewalk he came from. Later, that afternoon, while microwaving leftover pizza at home, his phone rang. Unknown number. His heart kicked. He hesitated, then picked up. "Hello? Is this Jamal Brooks?" a polished voice asked. "Yes. This is Eleanor Morris, assistant to Mr. Daniel Wexler. He's Margaret Wexler's son. We'd like to speak with you as soon as possible. Would you be available to come to our office downtown tomorrow afternoon?" Jamal blinked. Yeah, I guess. Perfect. I'll send a car to pick you up. 3 down p.m. Dress comfortably." The line clicked. He stared at the phone. What did she mean by comfortably? What the hell was this meeting? The next day, a sleek black car pulled up outside the rundown apartment building where Jamal lived with his mum. Neighbors peeked through blinds. Kids paused their bike riding. Jamal swallowed hard and climbed in. The driver didn't say much, just nodded and drove. They stopped in front of a towering skyscraper downtown, Wexler Tower. The glass reflected the cloudy sky, and inside the lobby smelled like money and fresh-cut lilies. People in suits moved with purpose. Jamal felt wildly out of place in his hoodie and clean sneakers, but no one stopped him. An assistant ushered him up to the 37th floor. The room they brought him into wasn't an office. It was more like a penthouse. Marble floors, art on the walls that probably cost more than his entire building, and in the center, behind a massive oak table, sat Daniel Wexler, tall, white, mid-50s, sharp gray suit and sharper eyes. "Jamal," he said, standing, "I've heard a lot about you in the last 24 hours. Jamal nodded, unsure if he should sit or salute or run. "You helped my mother yesterday." "When others didn't," Jamal shrugged. "She needed help. That's all." Daniel's expression didn't change. "People walk by need every day. You stopped. Why?" That question sat between them for a moment. "I don't know," Jamal said. "Felt like the right thing." She looked scared. Daniel nodded slowly. "She has early-stage Alzheimer's. We've been trying to let her keep some freedom, but yesterday was a wake-up call. She's stubborn. Always has been." He motioned toward a folder sitting on the table. "My mother hasn't stopped talking about you since she got home. Calls you her angel." Jamal's ears burned. "She's sweet." "No," Daniel said, opening the folder. "She's not. My mother built a financial empire by being ruthless, and for her to get soft over a teenager from Southside Atlanta, that's unusual." Jamal stiffened at the tone. He knew what that meant. Daniel didn't say it, but he meant people like you. He could feel the weight of it. Daniel slid a form across the table. "She wants to offer you something. A trial position. Think of it as a paid internship if you're interested. Nothing complicated. A couple of days a week. She wants to get to know you." Jamal stared at the form. Pay rate, 30 hour. That was more than his mom made. "You want me to hang out with her?" he asked. "Think of it as company. Maybe teach her how to use her tablet again. Talk with her. Keep her grounded. She trusts you." "Why me?" Daniel's face tightened just a bit. "I'm still figuring that out." Jamal sat back in the chair, the offer spinning around in his mind like a roulette wheel. This could be a setup. This could be weird. But it also felt real. It felt right. And more than that, it felt like a door opening. One nobody had ever offered him before. "I'll do it," he said finally. Daniel nodded once. "Good. You start tomorrow." As Jamal stepped back into the elevator, clutching the paperwork, he knew one thing for sure. His life would never be the same again. The next morning, Jamal dressed 3 times before settling on a plain white tee under a denim jacket and his cleanest pair of jeans. He stood in front of the bathroom mirror, brushing his waves flat and trying to look normal. Not too polished, not too street, just enough to not look like he didn't belong. At 9 a.m. sharp, the same black SUV pulled up outside. This time the driver nodded and even cracked a slight smile. "Morning, Mr. Brooks," Jamal smirked. "Mr. Brooks, chill. I'm just Jamal." The ride to the Wexler estate felt like a dream. They passed rows of homes with gates taller than people, security cameras on every tree, manicured lawns that looked like they'd been cut with scissors. Finally, they turned into a winding driveway lined with cherry blossom trees. The house, or mansion more like, looked like something out of a movie. Cream-colored stone, massive windows, a fountain in front that sprayed water like it was showing. Off Beverly, the assistant from the other day, met him at the door. "Welcome, Jamal," she said, clipboard in hand. "Mrs. Wexler is in the garden." He followed her down long hallways past paintings, glass cases, and furniture that looked like it had its own insurance policy. Eventually they reached a sun-drenched garden. Margaret Wexler sat under a wide umbrella in a wheelchair, wrapped in a soft cardigan, her hair neatly brushed. She looked up when Jamal approached, and her entire face lit up. "There's my angel," she whispered. Jamal smiled awkwardly. "Hey, Mrs. Wexler. Call me Margaret. Or Maggie. None of that formal nonsense." Beverly handed Jamal a tablet. "She's been trying to learn how to video call her granddaughter. She refuses to let us do it for her." Margaret waved her hand. "They all think I'm helpless. I'm just forgetful, not dead." Jamal chuckled, sitting beside her. "All right. Then, let's get you on FaceTime." He spent the next hour showing her how to swipe, how to open the camera, how to accept calls. She fumbled, cursed once under her breath, and then laughed when she saw her face on the screen. "My God, I look like a haunted doll," she said. Jamal snorted. "You just need some filters." They spent the morning like that, talking, teaching, laughing. She told him about growing up in a poor immigrant family in Chicago, how she used to clean houses before she became the woman who owned the houses. She talked about stocks, banks, betrayal. She spoke in stories that always had money at the center but people at the edges. What surprised Jamal most was how sharp she still was. Her memory stuttered sometimes. She'd forget what year it was or what day, but her spirit, that fire was still there. "Tell me about you, Jamal," she said after a while. He hesitated. Nobody ever really asked him that. "I'm just a kid from Glenwood," he said. "Trying not to screw up." She tilted her head. "You're not just anything, never say that." He glanced at her. "You don't know what it's like. Where I come from, people expect you to fail." "Then surprise them," she said. "Hell, I did." A few minutes later, Beverly returned with a tray of tea and snacks. She gave Jamal a nod like she'd been listening and approved. He spent the rest of the afternoon walking Margaret around the garden, talking about music, movies, life. She didn't act like a billionaire. She acted like someone who was tired of being treated like glass. With him, she could be normal. She could breathe. When the car dropped him off that evening, his mother was already home from her second shift. "Whose car is that?" she asked, suspicious. Jamal paused, then told her everything. "Not the billionaire part, just the helping a nice old lady part." She raised her eyebrows. "You better not be lying to me, Jamal. I swear," he said. "It's legit. I'm getting paid." "Paid? For babysitting?" He shook his head. "It's more than that." She sighed. "Well, if it keeps you out of trouble, I'm not complaining. Just don't get mixed up in rich people's business. That's a different kind of dangerous." He didn't argue, but he knew deep down he was already mixed up in it. As he lay in bed that night, Jamal thought about Margaret's voice, her laugh, the way she said his name like it mattered. It felt strange, but kind of good. He felt seen in a way that school, the streets, or even his family hadn't made him feel before. But Margaret Wexler wasn't just any old woman, and Jamal was starting to realize that there were secrets inside that mansion. Things unsaid, eyes always watching, and people like Daniel Wexler who didn't smile easily, and when they did, it didn't reach their eyes. Still, he had no idea just how deep those secrets went. Not yet. The third time Jamal came to the Wexler estate, things started to feel different. Margaret was the same, warm, witty, and sharp as ever. They played chess in the garden, drank tea that tasted like flowers, and even watched old sitcoms on her tablet. But the house, the vibe, something had shifted. The staff watched him more closely. A tall man in a black suit, who never gave his name, always seemed to linger just within earshot now. Even Beverly was more reserved. Her usual friendliness dulled like a smile that had worn out its welcome. Jamal felt it in his gut. They weren't just being cautious, they were being protective. And not of Margaret, of whatever secrets this house held. That day, while Margaret napped, Jamal wandered into the house to use the restroom. On his way back, he took a wrong turn, at least that's what he told himself. He found himself in a long hallway with closed doors. At the end, one was open just enough to reveal a flicker of movement and the sound of raised voices. "He's just a kid." "From the streets, Daniel." "Don't be paranoid," Beverly's voice snapped. "I don't trust that," Daniel replied, his voice sharp, cold. "She's never taken to anyone like this before. He's inside the estate now. That's a liability." Jamal's heart pounded. He pressed closer to the door, holding his breath. "She likes him," Beverly argued. "She remembers him. That's rare these days," Daniel scoffed. "That's exactly why I don't like it. If she remembers him, what else will she remember?" There was a silence. Then Daniel said, lower, "If she talks about the trust again or the 2006 memo, shut it down. Fast. She's already leaking too much." "Leaking?" Beverly asked. "Talking," Daniel clarified. "Rambling, connecting, dots. The boy might seem harmless now, but he won't stay stupid forever." Jamal stepped back slowly, the blood draining from his face. He turned and walked back to the garden like nothing had happened. Margaret was still asleep in her chair, a book open in her lap. He sat beside her, but he couldn't focus anymore. His brain kept spinning on one thing. What the hell is the 2006 memo, and why did they care so much about what Margaret remembered? The next week, Jamal decided to test something. He brought up 2006 casually, like a joke. "Hey, Margaret, where were you in 2006? I was like, barely out of diapers." Her eyes clouded for a moment, then narrowed. 2006, she said slowly, tapping her temple. "That was the year Daniel shut down the offshore accounts, or said he did. There was a meeting. Lawyers. I remember it." Jamal leaned in. "Why? Would he shut down accounts?" She looked away, distracted. "He said it was about taxes, but I never saw the paperwork. I told them I wanted everything clean before I died. But Daniel always liked things complicated." She drifted off again. Jamal didn't press. But now he knew. Something shady happened in 2006, and Margaret was the only one who could blow it wide open, and they were terrified she might. That evening, just as he was leaving, Beverly pulled him aside. "Be careful what you talk about with her," she said, voice low. Jamal frowned. "You mean about her family?" "I mean about anything," she replied sharply. "She's ill, confused. Sometimes she gets ideas. Don't feed into them." She seemed pretty clear today. Beverly leaned in closer. "Listen, Jamal, you've been great with her, but don't overstep. You don't know what you're stepping into." Jamal held her gaze. "You scared I'll find something?" Beverly's expression didn't change. "I'm scared you'll ruin a good thing and get hurt in the process." That night, back in his room, Jamal replayed everything, over and over in his head. He pulled out the card Daniel had given him and flipped it between his fingers. He had come here to help an old woman. Now he was knee-deep in a billionaire family's dirty secrets. But more than that, he cared about Margaret. He couldn't just sit back and ignore what was happening. He opened his laptop and typed, "Wexler Holdings 2006 scandal." The screen loaded slowly. What came up made his stomach drop. An old article, buried, archived, barely a blip in the press. SEC suspends. Internal Wexler Holdings inquiry after family settles privately. Jamal clicked. It was vague, full of legalese. But the core was clear. There was a money trail, offshore holdings, millions unaccounted for. And Margaret had allegedly tried to bring it to light, until the whole thing vanished. Buried. He leaned back. They weren't just trying to protect Margaret from dementia. They were trying to protect themselves from her memory. And now he was the only one she trusted. Jamal knew he should walk away. He wasn't rich. He wasn't connected. He wasn't supposed to be anywhere near the kind of mess that billionaires could clean up with a phone call and a private jet. People like Daniel Wexler didn't get caught. They made others disappear, especially kids from neighborhoods like his. But he also knew something else. Margaret Wexler wasn't crazy. The more time he spent with her, the more she remembered. And the more she remembered, the more it scared everyone around her. Daniel, Beverly, the quiet bodyguards who watched, without blinking. They all smiled politely when he arrived, but Jamal could feel it now, the tension like glass ready to shatter. The next afternoon, while Margaret napped again, Jamal sat on the patio scrolling through more articles about Wexler Holdings. Most had been buried under fluff, charity galas, awards, investments. But every now and then, he'd find small cracks. Whistleblower who'd vanished. An auditor fired in 2007. A suspicious merger that swallowed a failing company and somehow doubled Wexler's assets. And always, Daniel was right there in the background, smiling for the cameras. Margaret woke up with a start. "Did I sleep through lunch again?" she asked. Jamal looked over. "Barely, you were just resting your eyes." She chuckled. "Liar, you're sweet." He hesitated, then said, "Hey, Margaret, can I ask you something?" "Of course. In 2006, you mentioned you told your lawyers to clean things up. Offshore accounts. You wanted everything above board before, before anything happened to you." Her face stiffened. "Did Daniel listen?" She looked at him long and hard. Then she said, "He pretended to, but I think he buried the truth. I trusted him with too much. He had power of attorney at the time, said he'd take care of things quietly." That's when the accounts vanished. Lawyers went silent. I started getting excluded from board meetings. "Why didn't you fight back?" "I tried," she said, voice cracking. "But they told everyone I was losing my mind. Early dementia, they said. A graceful retirement. I didn't even get to pick my successor. They froze me out. My own son." Jamal felt sick. "That's why they're scared of you remembering things now." "Exactly," she whispered. He looked at her, vulnerable and regal in her chair, her hands folded over a blanket like a queen in exile. "I need to show you something," he said. He pulled out his phone and brought up the 2006 article. Margaret squinted, and he enlarged the text. Her lips moved as she read. "They said it was settled. I never signed anything. They forged my damn signature." "You sure?" "I'd bet my fortune on it," she said. He thought for a moment, then asked, "Do you have a will?" Margaret smiled sadly. "A long one. But Daniel had the most recent version changed. He says it's to simplify things. Beverly handled the paperwork. I was so tired at the time, I didn't argue." "You trust Beverly?" "I did. Now I'm not so sure." Jamal leaned closer. "What if we proved it? The forgery, the accounts, everything." Margaret looked away. "It's not that easy." "I know," he said. "But I know someone who can help." That night, Jamal met his cousin Trey behind the old barbershop. Trey wasn't some street hustler, he was smarter than that. A college dropout who'd gotten deep into IT security and hacking. Mostly did petty stuff, jailbreaking phones, unlocking stolen iPads, making fake report cards. But he had skills. "I need a favor," Jamal said. Trey raised an eyebrow. "This about that rich white family you've been hanging with?" Jamal nodded. "Yeah, but it's not what you think. They're hiding some serious money, like offshore account type stuff. And Margaret, the grandma she didn't know, she wants proof. I need to see if someone forged legal docs." Trey's expression shifted from amused to curious. "You serious?" "Dead serious," Trey scratched his chin. I ain't about to go toe-to-toe with billionaires, man. That's how people end up in trunks. I'm not asking you to break into the Pentagon. Just help me scan a document, see if it's real, maybe get into their public company records. Trey sighed. You better be ready. Once you poke that kind of bear, it don't just roll over, it bites. I already poked it. Trey smirked. Of course you did. The next morning, Jamal showed up to the estate with a cheap USB drive in his pocket and a plan forming in his head. He had one shot at this. He would find that will. He would scan it. And if it was forged, if Daniel really did cut Margaret out, silence her, lie to her, he'd expose it. But what Jamal didn't know was that someone else had been watching. Beverly. And she'd already told Daniel everything. Jamal could feel eyes on him the second he stepped through the Wexler estate gates. That morning, the usual warmth was gone. No friendly nods from the gardener. No small talk from the kitchen staff. Even the bodyguard at the front door didn't say a word, just stared at him like he was wearing a threat instead of a hoodie. Inside, Beverly was already waiting for him. In the foyer, arms crossed, clipboard gone. "Mr. Wexler would like a word with you," she said flatly. Jamal's stomach twisted. "Right now?" She nodded. "Right now." She led him to Daniel's study, a room Jamal hadn't been in before. It was darker than the rest of the house, lined with oak shelves and expensive books that looked like they'd never been opened. Daniel sat behind a desk, fingers steepled, eyes cold. "Sit," he said. Jamal sat. Daniel leaned forward slowly. "Do you have any idea how dangerous it is to dig through things that don't concern you?" Jamal met his gaze. "It concerns Margaret. She asked me to look." "She's sick," Daniel said sharply. "She's confused. Her mind plays tricks. On her." "She's not as confused as you think," Daniel's jaw flexed. "She gets fixated. She thinks there's a conspiracy every time she forgets something. It's called paranoia. She remembers the 2006 accounts. She remembers the will, the memo." Daniel's eyes darkened. "You're a smart kid, Jamal," he said after a pause. "Smarter than you look. So let me give you some advice. Walk away. Take the money. Take the nice resume reference, but stay in your lane." "I'm not looking for trouble." "Yes, you are," Daniel interrupted. "You just don't understand how big this trouble is. You think you're a hero, that you're going to expose something and the world will applaud you? No, you'll vanish, quietly, and no one will ask questions." The words landed heavy, but Jamal didn't flinch. He stood. "I'm not scared of you," Daniel smiled, cold and empty. "You should be." Jamal walked out of the office without another word. His legs were shaking, but his mind was clearer than ever. That afternoon, while Margaret was resting in her room, Jamal slipped into the West Wing. Beverly had mentioned once that all the family documents, wills, property papers, investments were kept in Margaret's old office. He found it at the end of a narrow hall. The door was unlocked. Inside, dust hung in the air like secrets. A mahogany desk sat in the center, stacked with folders and legal books. On the wall, photos of Margaret with presidents, prime ministers, and old financial tycoons. She had lived a life louder than the house let on. Jamal started pulling open drawers. Most were filled with mundane stuff, bank brochures, old schedules, handwritten notes. But in the bottom drawer, beneath a false wooden panel, he found it. A red leather folder marked Last Will and Testament, 2007 revision. He opened it. The signatures were there. Margaret's, Daniel's, the witnesses. It looked legit. But something was off. The witness names. They matched employees Jamal had seen in articles dated years after the will was supposedly signed. He slipped the folder into his backpack, heart hammering. Closed the drawer. Straightened everything. He was almost to the hallway when he heard footsteps. Beverly. He ducked behind a cabinet, breath held. She entered the room slowly, paused, looked around, like she knew someone had been there but couldn't. Prove it? After a moment, she walked out. Jamal slipped out the back entrance, got into the SUV, and didn't say a word until he was safely back home. That night, he met Trey again in the alley behind the barber shop. "This the document?" Trey asked. Jamal handed him the red folder. "I think it's forged. I need to know for sure." Trey flipped through the pages, whistled low. "This thing is cleaner than a bleach commercial. But yeah, These signatures? The witnesses weren't. I've been working for Wexler Holdings in 2007. One of them didn't move to Atlanta until 2009. He closed the folder and looked at Jamal. Your lady's will was faked, no doubt. Jamal felt a strange mixture of anger and power surge through him. He had the proof. But now what? If he went public, Daniel could bury him. If he went to the police, they might laugh him out of the building. If he told Margaret, she'd be devastated. Or worse, Daniel might retaliate, but Jamal had come too far to stop. He was going to do what no one in that family expected. He was going to fight back, with the truth, and with Margaret Wexler at his side. Jamal didn't sleep that night. The red folder sat on his desk like a live wire, humming with the power to burn everything down. The evidence was real. Trey had confirmed it. The 2007 will wasn't just suspicious, it was a complete fabrication dressed up with forged signatures and fake witnesses. It stripped Margaret of control over her own legacy and handed it all to Daniel on a silver platter. And now Jamal held the one thing that could ruin him. But this wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about dignity, about making sure that Margaret Wexler, confused or not, wasn't erased from her own story by a man who saw her as an obstacle. By morning, Jamal had made up his mind. He was going to tell her everything. The Wexler estate was unusually quiet. When Jamal arrived, the driver didn't speak. The gates opened more slowly than usual, like the house itself knew what was coming. When Beverly met him at the door, she didn't smile. "She's waiting for you in the library," Beverly said coldly. "But I wouldn't get too comfortable if I were you." Jamal didn't answer. He found Margaret in a high-backed chair by the window, wrapped in a shawl, sunlight painting streaks of silver in her thinning hair. She looked older today, tired, like the weight of her years was finally catching up, but her eyes were sharp. "I know that look," she said before he even sat down. "You've found something." Jamal nodded and pulled out the folder. He placed it in her lap gently. "That will," he said. "It's fake. The witnesses were never there. Your signature looks copied. Daniel rewrote your legacy. He gave himself everything." Margaret stared at the papers in silence. Then, slowly, she began to nod. "I thought so," she whispered. "He always wanted control. I taught him to be ruthless, but I never imagined he'd use it on me." Her hands trembled. "He's been waiting for me to forget completely, to die quietly, confused, and leave it all to him like I asked for." "You didn't," Jamal said, "and now we can prove it." She looked up at him, something shifting behind her eyes. Pride. Fire. "You're not just a boy from Glenwood," she said. "You're a lion." Jamal almost laughed. "Nah, I'm just tired of seeing good people pushed around." Margaret sat up straighter, her voice gaining strength. "Then help me do one last thing before I lose this mind completely." "What do you need?" "Call a lawyer, one I trust. His name's Gregory Ellison. He owes me more than a few favors. I want a new will written. Today. I want Daniel cut out completely." Jamal hesitated. "Are you sure?" She gave him a look. "That could slice steel. I was a billionaire before Daniel could tie his shoes, and I will die a billionaire on my terms. That snake doesn't get to write my ending." Gregory Ellison arrived in a dark grey suit and quiet shoes that screamed money. He looked surprised when Jamal opened the door, but once Margaret explained, his tone shifted from polite to dead serious. "I'll draw up the new documents this afternoon," he said. "You'll need 2 independent witnesses, people not tied to the Wexler family." "I've got a cousin," Jamal offered. "And a teacher who'd do it." "Perfect," Gregory said. "But once this gets signed, Daniel will know, you understand?" Margaret smiled. "Let him. I want him to know. I want him to watch." By evening, the new will was signed and sealed. Trey and Ms. Diaz, Jamal's old English teacher, served as witnesses. Gregory filed the documentation immediately. It was legal, binding, and bulletproof. Margaret's assets would be split among charities, scholarships, and only one named beneficiary, Jamal Brooks. Jamal nearly fell out of his chair when she insisted. "You changed my life, child," she said. "When everyone else ignored me, you saw me, and now I want to make sure you never go unseen again." He didn't want it, didn't ask for it, but she made it clear. This was her choice. And for once, she wanted to make a choice they couldn't erase. Daniel found out the next morning. He stormed into the garden like a thundercloud in a silk suit. "You little bastard," he snarled at Jamal. "You think you're going to steal from this family?" "I'm not stealing anything," Jamal said calmly. "I just gave Margaret her voice back." "You manipulated her, took advantage." "She signed it, Daniel," Gregory interrupted, stepping into the garden, with full mental capacity. "Two independent witnesses. The new will is filed. It's done." Daniel's face twisted with rage. "You'll regret this, Jamal. You don't know who you're dealing with." "I think I do now," Jamal said. And for the first time, Daniel had nothing to say. That night, Jamal sat with Margaret under the stars. She looked peaceful, even with her memory slipping like sand through her fingers. "You were brave," she whispered. "So were you." She reached out, and he took her hand. Not as a caretaker, not as a charity case, but as someone she had chosen. Someone who had given her the one thing no one else in her billion-dollar world could: dignity.